America, land of the free and home of the brave, where 330 million free individuals live their lives to the fullest. A country where the people are proud and the government is strong. America, the perfect realization of a democracy and all that it promises.
100,000 Ukrainians fleeing war to the United States.
Our borders are welcoming to the tired, the poor.
So there's a lot of hope for these people this morning.
Our streets are free from political violence. Our leaders advance the qualities of liberalism and equality. Our people are enfranchised and empowered by their government to make their voices heard.
Okay, are you good?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Are we rolling?
Yeah, go.
Okay. This is the story of
17 students from an American college.
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 And what happens when?
And what happens when?
And what happens when?
And what happens when? They meet amazing people from different backgrounds.
They float in the Dead Sea.
They eat amazing food from all over the world.
They visit ancient sites.
Carved in stone centuries ago.
They lose all of their luggage in an airport.
They swim down a river in the Amazon.
They watch the most amazing sunset in the desert.
They explore the cloud forest.
They come across interesting animals.
The most poisonous snake in the Amazon.
They take a salsa class. They find an active volcano. They visit a spa of thermal waters.
They have 3 different classes in 3 different countries.
They spend their spring semester traveling the world and exploring the states of democracy in the countries they visit. Is that all right?
Yeah, that's good. Keep going.
Okay.
So let's begin with the state of democracy in the West.
Although the world has obviously gotten a lot more democratic over the past century and the past 30 years, things appear to have regressed somewhat.
The troubling rise of authoritarian leaders around the world.
Brazil has a new president, becoming the latest nation to elect a far-right leader.
This is a very dangerous situation for American democracy.
The collapse of centrist institutions has been accompanied by a rise of the far right.
The 20th century was marked by conflicts between different systems of government: democracy, communism, and fascism. With the end of the Soviet Union, it was clear that the democracies had prevailed. With that came the hope that this model would spread further and further around the world. And in many places, it did. But suddenly, everything changed.
By democratic regression.
Military action is possible if that's what's required.
The military attempted a coup. Fitness instructor that inadvertently captured the moment of the military convoy.
Full-scale Russian invasion of Ukraine that it was imminent.
Vladimir accuses of trying to stage a coup.
The onset of democracy began to stall. Today, many of the world's democratic institutions are in crisis. Countries once on the track to a democratic future unraveled, one after the other. Turkey, Nicaragua, Bahrain, Ethiopia, Venezuela, Myanmar. So what happened? Has democracy as a system of government outlived its utility? We don't know. But what we do know is that the values we associate with democracy, freedom of expression, sovereignty, equal representation, due process, integrity, are all values we believe in. They are values we are willing to fight for. And just like democracy, these values are under threat. To understand this movement across the world, we, a group of 17 college students, traveled to 3 different countries with different languages, ecosystems, geographies, histories, economies, 3 different systems of governing. all with the hopes of finding some answers. We started our journey in one of the most biodiverse corners of the world. Ecuador offers everything. Mountainous peaks such as Antisana and Pichincha that put you above the clouds, where one can look down at Quito from afar. Dense Amazonian jungle with murky rivers teeming with caiman, anacondas, and animals you might just want to stay away from. Cloud forests where, frankly, rubber boots are a must. Wildlife, hikes, waterfalls, more hikes, volcanoes, and surprise, another hike. But our experiences in Ecuador reached beyond the tranquility of the remote natural areas and into the Ecuadorian community and culture. We traveled to Cotacachi and learned about the indigenous agricultural practices, taking care of the animals, working in the gardens, cooking dinner by the fire. We traveled to Mindari Panga and learned about life in the Amazon, including hunting practices, wedding ceremonies, medicinal plants, making shelters, bamboo horns, and chocolate. As we learned about nature and culture, there was yet another layer to our experience: the people. And in hearing their stories, we learned some of the most important lessons of all.
Soy Eduardo, soy nativo de Venezuela y vivo acá en Ecuador con mi familia.
Eduardo is a Venezuelan refugee who came to Ecuador 5 years ago after the country collapsed under President Maduro. And his story illustrates potential threats to democratic values in Ecuador.
Realmente cuando murió Chávez, después de la muerte de Chávez, que llegó Maduro, todo se empezó a complicar y realmente comenzó una guerra económica entre la empresa privada y Maduro. Y entonces quedamos atrapados nosotros en el medio, sin saber qué hacer, y bueno, eso obligó a mucha gente a salir del país.
The situation in Venezuela has led to countless stories like Eduardo's due to the harsh realities in his home country.
Realmente cuando miré que no tenía nada para comer, tomé la decisión por mi hijo. Y ahí fue donde, sin pensarlo, me vine.
Due to the horrible situation in Venezuela, many people make the difficult decision to move across borders to escape poverty and violence throughout the country. But it isn't an easy decision.
El año acá fue muy duro. Fue muy duro porque nunca me había alejado de mi familia, solo acá, sin conocer a nadie, solamente mi prima. Cuando salí a la calle a buscar trabajo, claro, me mantenía la mente ocupada y eso no, me ayudaba a no pensar tanto. Llegué a tener 5 trabajos. 5 trabajos al mismo tiempo. Trabajaba en un restaurante en la semana, salía a las 4 de la tarde, de ahí me iba a un bar, después estaba en la calle cuidando carros, cuidando autos, pidiendo monedas, trabajaba los fines de semana en un museo de Star Wars, me disfrazaba en la calle, bailando, payaso. Y acá en el hotel, casi de inmediato llegando al país, tuve esa suerte, empecé a trabajar. Creo que al mes siguiente, a los 2 meses, pero solo fines de semana, sábado y domingo. Bueno, salía toda la semana trabajando, tenía 3 trabajos en la semana y sábados y domingos trabajaba acá en la noche. Así estuve todo el año. Y bueno, el dolor de estar solo, cualquier niño que veía, cualquier familia que veía me lastimaba, me recordaba a mi familia, no descansaba, me estaba enfermando realmente, pero bueno, las ganas de volver a ver a mi familia y de reunir el dinero para traerlos era más fuerte.
For refugees like Eduardo, Ecuador can be a place to call home, a haven, and yet, Ecuador is certainly not perfect.
Como yo no sabía la cultura de acá, no sabía lo que estaba pasando con la xenofobia, me vine así de inocencia. Cuando llegué me trataron muy mal, como un perro en la calle. Me negaban hasta el agua.
This hatred towards refugees has only been heightened in recent years as crime rates spiked and the Venezuelans were blamed.
En todos los países hay delincuencia, más en Latinoamérica, pero son muy amarillistas. Hay un venezolano que roba o se porta mal porque pasa. Y entonces ya satanizan a toda la población venezolana y nos persiguen y nos señalan y es muy duro.
Eduardo's story highlights the fear which has taken hold in Ecuadorian society. Ecuadorians, with the hope of combating criminality, elected right-wing President Guillermo Lasso in 2021.
We just finished a long period of governments that were left-wing governments, and we have moved into a new kind of government which is very right-wing. And so, is Lasso a democratic president? He was elected democratically. If he's democratic or not, I think we can. That remains to be seen in the future.
Today, Lasso seems to be fulfilling his promises.
Porque en las calles del Ecuador hay un solo enemigo, el narcotráfico.
But in enforcing order on the streets, Lasso has also been able to justify a limitation of freedoms everywhere. Under a state of emergency, authorities will be able to restrict freedom of movement, assembly and association, and Lasso has already mobilized thousands of soldiers and police who are equipped to do so. In Ecuador, authoritarian politics, fueled by xenophobia, threatens democratic values. However, authoritarianism isn't the only problem Ecuador faces. Corruption runs rampant throughout the government. This is Diana, a former employee of the Ecuadorian government.
Yo era jefa de servicios institucionales, mantenimiento y transporte. Eso implica que tenía que estar pendiente de 7 centros de salud. Entonces yo tenía que estar pendiente de la infraestructura, que todo esté bien, que no haya goteras, que los equipos médicos se den mantenimiento. Era un cargo de mucha responsabilidad.
Sounds like meaningful work, right?
Mi jefa inmediata era la directora administrativa financiera del distrito. Y sucede que el negocio de ella era meter las ambulancias en mecánicas donde le daban dinero a ella. Entonces el interés de ella no era realmente arreglar las ambulancias, sino era que le den dinero a ella.
When Deanna decided to do her job with integrity and make the right decision to fix the ambulances the right way, she faced pushback from her boss. And eventually, she was fired from her job. Unfortunately, Deanna's story is just one out of many which highlights corruption in Ecuadorian politics. When democracies become corrupt and self-interest is indulged, equal representation and integrity suffer. Elections are meant to give a voice to the people, and when they don't, the people start to lose hope.
We are a democracy, but it's not a perfect democracy. We have a lot of failings in the way we do politics, and so the participation is not equal from all sectors of the population.
The Ecuadorians we met passionately share our democratic values, but for them, campaign promises have become just that, promises. For them, politics are not an avenue for change. Politics are a distraction. In Ecuador, corruption, along with the apathy towards politics it inspires, threatens democratic values. As we left behind Ecuador's nature, culture, and our newfound friends, we also began to wonder, is a democratic system of governing the best chance we have of promoting democratic values? Could democratic values have any chance of survival in a non-democratic country? Well, let's try and find out. Our questions traveled with us as we flew halfway across the world to a place where the culture is rich, the ambrosia is sweet, and the people are welcoming. Jordan. Our experience in Jordan revolved around the region's history. We explored Petra, one of the 7 wonders of the world, a whole city carved into a wall of stone. We visited Wadi Rum and enjoyed an evening in a Bedouin tent before wandering under the light of the desert stars. We toured the city of Jerash, the ancient intersection of trade between Damascus, Baghdad, Beirut, and Jerusalem. We bathed in the Jordan River, Jesus' baptism site. While Jordan sits on ancient land, the country's government is still very young. Jordan was finally granted full independence from the British with the conclusion of World War II. Thus, in 1946, with Abdullah crowned king, the world witnessed the first official monarchy in what was called the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan.
From 1921 until 1946, the Emirates of Jordan, and then the independence in 1946, where we turned Jordan to be the monarch here in Jordan, and it was really from 1946 until 1951 when King Abdullah has been assassinated in Jerusalem.
Jordan today is recognized as a parliamentary constitutional monarchy, shaped by the institution of Jordan's first constitution, the Arab-Israeli War, Palestine's liberation efforts, and the growth of the Muslim Brotherhood. All the while, the country made democratic efforts by holding public parliamentary elections. Even so, when Jordanians have the chance to make their political voice known, they don't seem that interested.
And most Jordanians, they do not vote because they don't see any change. They do not see something that is happening in real life. There's no change. Members of parliament, they do not work, they do not respond, and they are restricted as well. So I think people in Jordan, they lost hope, to be honest, in the representation and who represent them in the parliament.
In 2020, only 29.88% of Jordanians turned out to vote, the lowest in a decade. Studying theater in Jordan, we had the opportunity to engage with a number of Jordanian artists. Even though their jobs are rooted in and require the ability to speak freely, they're constrained by what the state deems acceptable.
The censorship in Jordan is prevalent, and it definitely affects artists and the way they operate. So theatrical performances, rappers, even cartoonists, they've been sometimes, I would say, questioned by the authority. They've been told not to publish about certain things, not to tackle certain issues, politically speaking, socially speaking, and also religiously speaking. So it is difficult for an artist to be free and to send a free and dynamic message in the Jordanian culture. It is improving, but we're not there yet. We still need time.
But artists aren't the only ones who have been silenced by the Jordanian government. Take a look at this map. This is the World Press Freedom Index. It shows the press freedom situation in 180 countries and territories annually. The dark blue shows the countries where press freedom is good. And as the colors get darker, the situation gets worse. In 2021, Jordan ranked in place 120 behind other Arab countries like Tunisia. And as we saw with our own eyes, avoiding certain topics is still a must.
Just to finalize, last year a bunch of papers were leaked on what was called the Pandora Papers, and it's okay we can stop, but it was known that the King of Jordan had a bunch of offshore accounts. How did the Jordan people receive that, and was that actually received at all in Jordan?
In a leak of nearly 12 million confidential documents called the Pandora Papers.
A massive data leak has revealed the secret financial dealings of some of the world's richest and most powerful people.
We are learning more today about those offshore fortunes of hundreds of the world's most powerful and famous
people. All right,
people.
now, and what is being described as the biggest reveal so far?
The Pandora Papers, a set of leaked documents exposing the offshore accounts of global leaders. One of those leaders is King Abdullah II of Jordan, who owns 14 luxury homes throughout the US and UK. In total, his offshore empire totals more than $106 million. Sounds like big news, right? Well, not in Jordan. The one news source that did speak out quickly received a call demanding their silence. Jordan's constitutional parliamentary monarchy falls short of its democratic ideal, and in practice deteriorates into something closer to the absolute monarchy of its more authoritarian neighbors.
If there is no real, genuine belief within actually the inner circle that is ruling the Arab world, absolutely there is no hope actually for the future of democracy here in the Arab world. But the moment that those Arab regimes, Arab governments, they're starting to believe democracy is in their benefits and in their interest, absolutely then we will see it. But before that, we have to build institutions that has to believe in democracy. And before that, we have to work in civil society. Without building civil society, there is no hope for democracy in the Arab world.
So now, with 2 countries down, we were starting to draw some connections. And yet it was once again time to say goodbye to a country that had been home to us for the last month, and fly to our next, our final destination.
So right now we're planning what toiletries we need to get because our luggage is stuck back in London because they didn't have enough manpower to load all of the planes with our stuff. So we're stuck with our carry-ons, but we're making do.
After a long day of travel, we had finally arrived. We might not have had our luggage, but we had each other. And if the last 3 months have taught us anything, that's all we really needed. Here, in our final destination, we not only got to explore a new place, we got to do it with people who had become our best friends. While in many ways, the Czech Republic was about enjoying the relationships we had built with each other over the last few months, it was also a chance to learn about the country's fraught past. Here, fascism, communism, and democracy clashed just decades ago. The Czech Republic was under Nazi occupation in the mid-20th century, and fascist rule had devastating consequences for the country. Towns like Terezín were converted into Jewish ghettos that served as transit hubs for Jewish prisoners on their way to Auschwitz. It's no surprise then that the country welcomed communism after the Red Army liberated the region in the late 40s. This favor gradually faded as people began to feel the weight of authoritarian rule throughout the country. Eventually, resentment towards the Czechoslovak communist regime inspired one of history's most peaceful uprisings, the Velvet Revolution in 1989.
The Velvet Revolution was, I would say, a consequence of a long-term development here. We were very much suffering, and I personally was suffering that I could not travel, and we could not speak out, really. We were talking rather to our friends who we could trust. So dictatorship is never a good thing, and that's what we're experiencing here. It was unbearable, and I'm so happy it's gone.
Following the revolution, communism gave way to democracy. Czechoslovakia was divided in the peaceful divorce, Czech Republic was born, and since then, the country has been a bastion of democracy in the region. Czech Republic, officially known as Czechia, has a stable government, free and fair elections, and a politically engaged population. But even in Czech Republic, where democracy was just recently bravely reconquered, democratic values remain fragile. In 2017, Andrej Babiš was elected as the new prime minister in the country. Since then, the business tycoon has been involved in fraud allegations involving European Union funds to businesses in the Czech Republic, faced criticism for the mismanagement of the coronavirus pandemic, and, more recently, also had his name included in the Pandora Papers. Being one of Czech Republic's richest men, Babiš expanded his interest from the agricultural industry to the media, purchasing one of the country's largest newspapers, causing major concern given his political ambitions.
So I think one of the concerns here with freedom of the press was the influence of the former Prime Minister, Andrej Babiš, and the fact that he had purchased one of the most popular newspapers, who was broadly supportive of his government during the time that they were in power, and also certainly political pressure that's exerted on the public broadcaster, who seem to be impartial, but their oversight board has, great authority in terms of the editorial staff and some of the direction at both Czech TV and Czech Radio.
But when a politician with populist inclinations started to gain more power, the Czechs fought back.
In a shocking development, Prime Minister Andrej Babiš's centrist party has narrowly lost the Czech parliamentary polls.
In a shocking result during the 2021 parliamentary elections, the billionaire lost the country's administration after the opposition formed a liberal coalition that encompassed parties from the center-right to the center-left. The results came only 35 days after the Pandora Papers revealed Babiš used offshore companies to buy a luxury French Riviera estate. And just a few months later, a new issue had taken center stage.
Major news. After days on a razor's edge, Ukraine is now a nation at war.
190,000 Russian troops and their proxies coming from Ukraine's northern, eastern, and southern borders.
Announcing what Putin called the start of a military special operation, in his words, to demilitarize Ukraine.
With Ukraine just a few hundred miles away, the prospect of Russian invasion is top of mind for many Czechs who know that occupation would take them back to a time when they had no control over their own political fate. But Russian influence extends beyond the threat of military force and into the pockets and the minds of the Czech people.
Because we're dependent on Russia with primarily gas, crude oil, but also crops and a lot of other kinds of food.
Economic dependence on a country that is a direct adversary places politicians in difficult positions during times of conflict. Right now, the Czech government is being forced to choose between the value of oil and opposition to Russian aggression. In addition, Russian propaganda and fake news try to manipulate people's decisions based on misinformation.
I think the concern right now is the fact that there isn't necessarily a narrative that's being enforced. It's the issue that there are lots of narratives being enforced, and how can anyone possibly know what the truth is? Because it could be this, and maybe it's this, and it's possibly that.
However, despite Russian efforts, during our stay we saw very little pro-Russia sentiment. In fact, we witnessed an outpouring of support for Ukrainian refugees in the form of signs and flags across the country. Unfortunately, the same support is not shown towards the Roma people who already live within the Czech border.
So my name is Denisa Makova. I am 28 and I am here as a representative of Roma community. So also many people don't know about the history of Roma people, that even from the 16th century we were not allowed to entrance some Czech and Slovakian cities. There were almost the signs like this city is not allowed to entrance this city for gypsies. So we couldn't even entrance the cities. And in 1927, that's very interesting because many people know the first Czechoslovakian president, Tomáš Masaryk, gave them the special IDs where was written that they are Roma. So there was perfect evidence for Hitler to send them to concentration camps. That's why during the Second World War, almost 95% of Czech Romani people were killed during the Holocaust. When they sent Roma people to concentration camps, they didn't even give them work. They just said, you should be separated from all of the people and you are just ready to be killed.
And how do Czechs address this dark part in their country's history?
So they ignore us. Like they don't want to deal with the Roma issues.
unwillingness to speak out about the Roma history in the country only furthers injustices against the community today. If the Czech conversation never strays from the threat of communist ideologies, it is possible that Roma people will continue to struggle to have their voice heard. Even though the Czech Republic is the most democratic country we've visited on this trip, it isn't perfect. What we've learned here is that democracy isn't an end, but a constant battle. As our semester comes to a close, we begin to tie together the lessons we've learned over the past 3 months. In Ecuador, Eduardo's and Diana's stories taught us about the dangers of corruption and of authoritarian politics. In Jordan, we learned about the censorship the artistic community faces, and we saw how it can be traced back to the power of their monarch. In the Czech Republic, we learned how the country's recent history can explain ongoing tensions with Russia and ongoing discrimination towards the Roma people. What we've observed is that as the gap broadens between those who are in positions of political power and those who are not, political engagement falls. This makes sense. When politics serve the interest of corrupt politicians, a monarch, or a foreign adversary at the expense of the people are disenfranchised. They lose hope. But even when hope dies in politics, it lives on elsewhere. Democratic values are innate in us, and they surface in relationships. Relationships with the political process, relationships with a community, and especially relationships with one another. We traveled around the world and encountered people from all walks of life. We met entrepreneurs, ecologists, professors, artists, journalists, refugees, activists, each with their own unique way of viewing the world. But despite differences in age, profession, and culture, each person demonstrated a desire to come together with others to make their communities better. In fact, these people went as far as to bring us into their lives and welcome us into their communities. Eating, drinking, dancing, laughing, hiking, cooking. With people unlike us, we forged friendships which changed us all for the better. And as world travelers, we expected difference. And this expectation allowed us to enter into relationships with open minds and to move beyond the labels that separated us. But difference doesn't come only with distance. It is present in our schools, our neighborhoods, our families. If we can manage to approach relationships abroad with open minds, what's to stop us from doing the same back home? What we've found is that one doesn't have to travel to exotic new places to explore relationships like these. During our semester abroad, as we navigated the highs and lows of international travel during a global pandemic, we also found such relationships among one another. As classmates became friends and friends became family, we came to realize that the democratic values we were investigating abroad were also growing within us. If we are to build from the experience we've outlined here for you all, we might say that democracy is best preserved when people are able to take a leap of faith, to go beyond what is comfortable and enter into relationships like these. Democracy, at its core, is about being okay with discomfort, and indeed, embracing it as something beautiful, as something worth fighting for.
This is the story of 17 college students. And what? And what happens when? This is the story of 17 college students. And what happens when? They travel the world, meet many new people, new places to see, and they ask lots of questions and learn together about democracy. Ecuador living, they're muddy now, on them Gonzalo tries to pee. Surprise I can 3. Welcome to Jordan, Habibi, Habibi, beep, 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 beep. Wahid Habsa, please. And the Czech Republic, the tram man comes, you run to save me, 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 me. Use the strategy. Prague only briefly, the editing suite. Tired but happy, the classmates turned family, embrace global citizenry. Now you've heard the story of 17 college students, and what happened when they traveled the world, met many new people, found places to see, and they asked lots of questions and learned together about democracy. 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 Democracy.